That $2 t-shirt with free shipping isn't some miracle of modern supply chains. It is a piece of economic warfare, actively dismantling your local economy, hacking your brain chemistry, and poisoning your bloodstream.
We all look at these apps and think we've found a cheat code for inflation. But you are actually the final, unwitting node in an algorithmic dumping ground designed to offload a superpower's macroeconomic crisis directly into your closet.
So today we are taking a deep dive into a massive stack of intelligence. We are pulling apart toxicological reports out of Seoul, global supply chain data, behavioral psychology studies. By the time we finish pulling this apart, that heavy discount is going to look like the most expensive purchase you